everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Chelisani and this is a channel on all things healing, and I hope you are healing wherever you are, whatever that looks like for you. And I hope this channel has been very instrumental where that is concerned for you. So this video, as you might have seen, is on my experience where labor was concerned. As you might have seen in the previous videos, I was expecting, and with that came labor. When I tell you the experience was beautiful, I am not joking. I think there is a lot that we hear about labor that obviously when you've not experienced something, you can only hear it from other people. And personally, the things I've heard about labor have been very scary and have had me thinking, ooh, I don't want to go through this, but I want a baby. So I can't have a baby without going through that, right? I mean, well, I could maybe, but that's neither here nor there. So with my experience, what happened is at 37 weeks, the doctors were basically worried about how small the baby was, and they started the conversation on induction. I did not want to hear about any of that because I had my mind set on wanting an vaginal birth. So when the conversation started, I rebuffed it, and I did not want to hear anything pertaining to that. I was even very clear with both my husband and the doctors that if the baby was not in any danger, I felt fine going along until even 40 weeks, if that's as far as we went. But the doctors were only fine up to a certain point. So what they did is they had me take more scans and do more tests. With each scan, with each test, something else was found. For instance, at some point my hemoglobin was low, and that's not a good thing when you're going to give birth, when you somewhat have low blood as well. I'm sorry, I'm not very savvy when it comes to that, but that was one of the scares. And the biggest scare was that the baby was measuring on the small side, and they were not sure if it was because the baby was not getting proper nutrients, given that I had vaginal cord insertion, which might lead to the baby not getting as much in terms of nourishment as they needed. And one of the tests actually showed that I had CMV, which is a virus, and the concern was that it might have been passed to the baby, which could lead to certain complications, certain growth defects where the baby was concerned. So as the doctor explained all that to me, I started seeing his point of view, or rather that point of view, because I ended up seeing quite a number of doctors. I started seeing that point of view, that concerns, and started as well considering and warming up to this idea that I might have to forego what I had preset in my mind, which would be an encouragement from myself to say be very flexible when you go into pregnancy or labor. I think we have an idea, and that's great. Be prepared as much as you can be, but have that flexibility, because a lot we don't control in there. A lot is unseen by us, and it just happens. And you're better off not being set on one thing. So yeah, they encouraged induction, and at some point we even set the date to say, okay, this is when this is going to happen. And that's when I started realizing this is real. There's no going back. There's a date that has been set. Now we know, and we basically know when the baby is going to be born. So I started getting ready, be it making sure that my diaper bag was ready, everything was ready in that regard. On the day of induction, we went there, and what they do is they try to measure and try and see whether you're dilated or not. And the steps of induction, I think there are 3 steps. There's a gel that they apply that will lead to dilation, and then there is something that they use, sort of a hook that they use to break your waters, and then there is fake oxytocin that they give you that then actually starts labor. So when I went in for this first step, which was intended to see whether I was dilated or not, they found out that I was actually dilated by God's grace. And by now, I believe I was 38 weeks and 5 days. So with my being dilated, I was 2 centimeters dilated at this point. Because I remember in our going there, I started feeling some cramping, and I was just breathing through it. It was nothing hectic in terms of pain. It was similar to period pain cramps. So I just continued breathing through it. Even when we went to the hospital, I was just breathing through it. I had taken a long shower. I was able to sleep, just get some rest and take it easy, because at this point I wasn't working, thank God. I didn't need to contend with that as well. So we got there. They mentioned it was 2 centimeters dilated. They recommended that I could either stay within the hospital and see and they could monitor and see how I progressed through the night, or I could go back home and labor at home and see how I progress if my water breaks. At this point, they did not intervene at all in terms of giving me medication or the gel, because it seemed like my body was doing the labor itself and didn't need any form of any form of help, really. So we decided we would come back home. Our apartment is a 5-minute drive from the hospital, so if anything, we can always drive back to the hospital if the water breaks or if labor progresses through the night. So that was decided, and then at 5 a.m. we were to be there for them to see how much I had progressed. If I hadn't progressed enough, they would break my waters. So they started the whole process again to try and see how far along I was in terms of dilation, and by then I was only 3 centimeters, and they felt they needed to intervene by breaking my waters, which they did. And I did not expect this, but it just felt like gushing of a warm liquid when they put the hook in and did that. And it's not necessarily just water, it's more viscous than water. It's thicker than water. So I got to see that, and it was cool. And the next step was to get me all dripped up, and one of my veins collapsed. There was blood. It wasn't the greatest of experiences. It was a bit painful. They had to look for another vein and use a different vein. And they started me on the oh my goodness, I've forgotten the name, the fake oxytocin. I'll write it somewhere or note it somewhere because I've forgotten. Sorry, guys. But yeah, they started me on that, and my labor started. So this was around, I'd say 8 a.m. when they gave me that. And active labor started around that time. I remember when I got the first proper contraction, the only thing I could think about was breathe through it. So yeah, when labor started, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. I know this is weird, and that is not to say it wasn't painful. The way I experienced it was that there was a lot of pressure within my mid area, from my stomach to my vagina to my buttocks, everything. There was just so much pressure. It was as though it was all being squeezed together into a tiny fist, and all I could think about in all that experience was just breathe through it. One of the midwives, well, the midwife who was actually helping us mainly through delivery, one thing she said that stuck with me through it all was that contraction is like a wave. You ride it and then you come with it. And with that, she was illustrating how I also needed to breathe. Like, it was really helpful in the sense that she would help me through it, and she was also a very calm person. Like, her temperament was calm. So was my husband. I remember he would come in every, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. He would give me water. At some point, they asked if I'd eaten anything. Breakfast was brought, but I didn't want to even look at it. I was not bothered. The only thing at this point I could concentrate on was literally my breath. I was not even focused on the pain. I was just focused on breathing deep, long breaths. And I believe that is what got me through it. At some point, she checked again to see how far dilated I was, and she was shocked and came back to mention that I was 10 centimeters dilated and that I could start pushing when I felt like it. When the next contraction came, I could start pushing. So this had been probably for going on for 4 hours before I could start pushing. And the pushing as well, I think the pushing for me was a bit psychological and a bit confusing to a certain extent, because I wasn't sure how I was pushing or how I was meant to push. In as much as I had gone to the physiotherapist and she had explained it to me at this point, and being in that situation, I didn't know what I needed to do. I remember the midwife mentioned to me that I need to push as if I'm doing a big poop. That's what she said, people, not my words. And I tried doing that, and she mentioned it was good, so I kept doing that. At some point, they got a bit worried because they couldn't monitor my baby's heartbeat properly, and they mentioned that they needed to insert something that would help measure in the head of the baby to try and monitor the heartbeat properly and monitor mine as well. So I pushed as much as I could, and in certain instances out here, them make comments such as, "This can go on for the whole day." I was trying by all means not to dwell on anything negative. Whatever was said externally, I did not want to dwell on it. I did not want to have it linger too much in my head, because I knew it would affect me. But at this point, they encouraged me to eat something. I think I ended up having a bite of a banana, because it was mentioned that I was exerting so much energy, and as I can imagine anyone in labor does, and otherwise I would crash if I didn't have a source of energy. So I had a bit of that. So I'd encourage you to eat. Don't overeat, because apparently that can also lead to one vomiting and it coming out the other sides as well. So I kept pushing and breathing through it still, and just staying as calm as I could. During those moments, I heard the midwife ask my husband, I think she was a bit concerned. She asked my husband if I'm always this calm and this quiet. I was honestly in a space of surrender. I was in a space of calmness, in a space of solitude and beauty, and I wanted to take it all in, and I'm so glad that I did. I did not panic when the comments were made. I did not panic when they even mentioned that the baby seemed to be in distress a bit and they could not monitor the heartbeat properly. All those comments, I just remained calm through it. There was mention of C-section at some point, and I knew I just needed to breathe through it. That's all I could do. I needed to be calm through it, and that's all I did. At some point, I remember her mentioning that she could see the baby's head. She even took my left hand and put it down there and had me feel the head. And I just remember thinking, even in that moment, how excited I was, and just thinking how beautiful it is that I get to experience this. My husband got to feel it as well. At this point, he was behind me and supporting me because I was pushing, and I was basically seated. I never at any point was I on the bed because I did not want that because of its side effects and on the back, and I was more comfortable on the floor anyway. So I kept pushing and pushing, and at some point I felt so much pressure within my vagina, and that was the head, and it was there for 4 minutes because the contractions were now relatively far apart because they had stopped the drip that had gotten things going where labor was concerned. And with that being the case, that I believe that is what is called the ring of fire. I just was breathing through it, and there was worship music playing, and it just put me in a zone of total peace and total joy. I knew what was at the end of it, and all I could do was leave it all to God and know that it was not by my might, nor by my strength, but by the Holy Spirit that I was there in the first place, having a baby, pushing a baby. So I just kept breathing and breathing, and at some point when a contraction came through, I pushed as hard as I could. I pushed so hard. I felt warmth coming out of me. I felt liquids. I literally felt some liquids even touch my foot. And I felt something, a body come over my chest. I felt little movements on my tummy, and those were my baby's feet. The hands were on the sides of my stomach and grabbing onto my stomach. There was no crying, but the warmth made me feel something I've never felt in my life. It made me feel so much love. And at this point, I had not made a sound when I was in labor at all. At this point, I just started crying uncontrollably. My baby was there. I was holding my baby, and when I tell you it was beautiful, when I tell you my baby was beautiful, even without having seen them, without having looked at them, just by feel, it's an understatement. There are no words, there's no description. It was just surreal. And I just remember my husband making all these sounds of excitement, and unfortunately he didn't get to cut the cord because the pediatric team had to come in urgently because of how little the baby was. But yeah, the baby was born. They were measuring on the low side, so much so there was even talk of the baby going to the nursery for them to monitor the baby more closely. The weight was 2.28, which was low for that gestational age, because at this point I was 38 weeks and 6 days along. And they asked me to get on the bed, and they brought the baby through and allowed the baby to move on their own to go and latch. And I don't think there was any milk coming through, but it was just beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced, and I hope you experience it as well. But yeah, that's my unmedicated vaginal birth story. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced, and I hope it's the same for you. I hope you experienced something as surreal and as sacred. I hope you take it all in, take as many pictures, videos, whatever it is, because some of it will just go over your head. You want to look back and admire it all. And I pray that wherever you are within this journey, you let people around you guide you, you listen to advice that's given to you, particularly by the medical professionals, but I hope you also do your own research. But yeah, that's my birth story. I pray and hope you're doing well wherever you are. Thank you for watching. Thank you for returning. If you have questions, comments, anything you'd want me to focus more on and discuss further, please let me know in the comment section. Subscribe if this has been instrumental for you, helpful in any way, shape, or form. Share with your friends, share with family. More than happy to engage in any way, shape, or form. Thank you so much. This is Healing with Chendesani. I hope to see you again on the next one. Have a beautiful day wherever you are. Bye.